Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Jacqueline East, and I'm a planning practitioner in Canada. Most of my work experience has been on the west coast of Canada and the prairies of Canada. But I do, because I've worked nationally, both at the Canadian Institute of Planners and in different provincial professional associations, I do have a sense of the national regard of planning. And in fact, when I just did my recent dissertation, I was dealing with case studies and relevant history on legislation across the country. Those 10 sessions will be really interesting if we can find lots of ways to engage, even though it is online. I would like to use Zoom. I like to use either Whiteboard or Miro to get engagement. Breakout rooms are really great at encouraging active participation by those who are in attendance. And it also generates, amongst themselves, they can generate even deeper inquiry to come back with deeper questions. And we can really get into what's missing, what's interesting, what isn't making sense in the information presented. The polls and quizzes I would use to really focus in on what the key takeaways are going to be and regain attention to the focus of the material. I would provide resources in links in the chat that could encourage information for participants to take away with them. And I think one of the most powerful things is to use images and graphics to illustrate, in this case, it's going to be the relationship between different levels of government, some of the laws and related to development and planning as they go over time. And just to give you a little bit of an example of how I might use a whiteboard or a Miro board, I'll just show you one that I recently used with a group on several occasions. This had to do with the history of regulation in Canada. And what I like about it is I was able to really focus in on a particular point of time. In this case, the history was the important part rather than a point in time. It would be much more vertical in the case of the content of this class. But I could go through, talk about the key points, but at the same time, of course, the participants can add their own sticky notes, questions at their leisure. They can also explore other material that is on the particular Miro board. What I can also do before I jump into the outline for the presentation is I have queued up just a brief excerpt from an asynchronous online presentation that I did a few years ago related to very locally focused audience. And I'll just jump in here at a point and give a bit of a sense of it.
Salt Spring Island are two of the three electoral areas in the Capital Region District, and all are under the authority of the Island Trust. There are many players directly involved in affordable housing for the Southern Gulf Islands, and I've attempted to summarize the relationships in this list. You'll notice the CRD and the Islands Trust both have authorities relating to the Southern Gulf Islands. The Preserve and Protect mandate of the Islands Trust drives the planning and land use matters on the islands, but the core housing services are delivered by the CRD through its Capital Region Housing Corporation. Both the CRD and the Island Trust have affordable housing strategies. So I'll try to summarize these local government service providers a little more for you. First, the Capital Region District began assembling land and building public and private housing in 1974. The letters patent were amended in 1982 to give the CRD authority to create the Capital Region Housing Corporation. The CRD owns the Capital Region Housing Corporation in order to acquire, develop, and operate affordable housing. They currently have over 1,400 units and 46 complexes and house more than 4,000 people. The Regional Housing Trust Fund was established by the CRD board in 2005.
I just want to give you a bit of an overview of what the program would look like. Well, the first part is looking at this separation of authority in Canada. It's going to start with certainly an introduction, which I also when we think about land and property law in Canada, we also need to think about the fact that it's very new here. So the Constitution is only 157 years old right now. Anyway, session 2 is going to then talk about the Constitution. What is that framework? How the British North America Act morphed into the Constitution in 67. I would look at how talk about how the federal powers delegated to the provincial powers in both property and civil rights, which really affects property and development. And then there's going to be a reference to a 1982 constitutional amendment that further complicated the relationship with land as it relates to our Indigenous population. The third session is going to really focus on federal planning and how the federal lands come into play, what jurisdictions of legal authority the Government of Canada has, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and also the Canadian Bill of Rights. Session 4 is about the provincial planning and development laws. And of course, this is where most of the authority sits. However, it may be impacted by the other jurisdictions. So we will talk about provincial planning itself with a great case study from Manitoba, the provincial land use policies that all provinces had, and how they delegate authority to local governments. We then jump into that second section. So we're looking at the local government planning and development laws, and this is where everything really happens on the ground and most of the planning work happens. So we'll work through 4 parts. There's going to be the regional approaches with some case studies related to regional planning, and I'll use from British Columbia. We'll talk about the extensive powers of a local or municipal council, and then focus right down into official community plans that are laws unto themselves, as well as zoning, which is the local land use bylaws that control a lot of what happens. Then there's a section that'll talk about how do these groups work together. Session 10 is going to try to look forward, saying what's happening right now and what's it going to look like in the future. In the end, I think that there's 3 real groups of audiences that may be interested in this kind of session. On one hand, I think that planners, architects, and other community development professionals who are really seeking that broader context to their practice in Canada and abroad will find this quite interesting. I think government and community leaders who are motivated to affect change in the government, the governance of the planning and development law in Canada, will find this interesting. And then individuals who are interested in investing in Canada's real estate market would be well equipped to learn some of these ideas and add them to their knowledge base. So that's what I have for now, from the premise of contacting you with very short notice. I would love to be able to put this together as a more robust and massaged approach with much more detail, if that makes sense for both of us. Thanks for your time.